Too many people are obsessed with building massive biceps or getting a really big squat or bench press, whilst at the same time being content to literally allow other muscle groups to atrophy, to waste away through complete disuse. And these muscle groups in some cases are things that would actually provide us with greater functional benefit than all that other stuff. There's a few examples of this that I've covered on the channel in the past, but today I'm talking about the muscles of the foot, more specifically the intrinsic muscles of the foot. We're talking about muscles that are located inside the foot that actually change the shape of the foot as you contract them. There are ways we can actually train these, and they've been shown to improve things like running speed, jumping height, even preventing falls and injuries. This is not just a gimmick. Before we carry on with this video, I just want to make a quick disclaimer, which is to say that I'm going to minimize the amount that my feet are on camera, but unfortunately they probably will have to be a little bit on camera. Thing is, my feet are, hairy, they're wide, they're often slightly yellower than the rest of my body, and they're almost always wet. That is to say that they're certainly an experience. Probably some people are into that, which just makes it worse, but I think we just got to get it over with, and the less said about it, the better. I think I've made it weirder by even mentioning it. So let's go over some of the intrinsic muscles of the foot and what it is they do and why they're so important. So first of all, you have the lumbricals. These are muscles that flex the toes. Most toe flexion is actually handled by extrinsic muscles located in the lower leg, like the flexor digitorum longus, which is a deep muscle located in the calf and controls the flexion of the four small toes. The flexor halucis longus, meanwhile, controls flexion of the big toe. The extensor digitorum longus and the extensor halucis longus, meanwhile, are the corresponding toe extensors, also located in the lower leg. However, the lumbricals aid in this, and specifically in the flexion of the joints of the toes, the metatarsophalangeal joints and the interphalangeal joints. During toe gripping and activities that require more toe dexterity, they contribute to positioning and control. The interossei, meanwhile, are important for spreading the toes and pulling them together, for abducting and adducting them. The dorsal interossei abduct, while the plantar interossei adduct. This can help provide balance when standing, and they're also important for martial artists, like if you want to create a bladed foot for a karate sidekick, for example. Shoes that crush your toes together are terrible for completely negating the function of these muscles. You simply wouldn't do this to any other muscle in your body. The abductor halucis is another intrinsic muscle of the foot that actually contributes to movement of the toes. Specifically, the abductor halucis helps to abduct the big toe, move it away from the other toes, but it also contributes to flexion. The abductor halucis also contributes to flexion of the foot itself, helping to curl the ball of the foot towards the heel. Now this is really important because it helps to maintain the structure of the arch, and strengthening this muscle might also help some people with flat feet. It also helps with balance, as when you lean forward you can flex this muscle to provide a counterbalance and to push yourself back up. The flexor digitorum brevis is a muscle that flexes the middle phalanges of the small toes. Training this muscle can improve walking stability and toe grip strength. It can also help to ease plantar fasciitis. And the abductor digiti minimi flexes and abducts the little toe and supports the lateral longitudinal arch. It also contributes to balance and is especially important when moving dynamically, especially in the frontal plane. Toe spreading and some balance exercises could be enough to help develop this muscle. Training these muscles is important because it gives you more purchase and balance on the ground. So the idea is, for example, that if you're leaning forward slightly, you can then dig the base of your foot into the ground in order to prevent yourself from falling over, to provide that counterbalance. Like I said, they also support the arch of your foot, they prevent falls. But the problem is that most of us don't use these muscles at all the way we're supposed to. And you probably know where I'm going with this. This is thanks to wearing modern shoes, which essentially act like a splint for your foot. The best example I can think of is when I broke my wrist very severely when I was 15. I completely smashed both bones as well as the growth plate, my hand was on backwards, and I had to be in a cast that went all the way up to my shoulder for multiple months. And when my arm came out of that cast, the bicep was so atrophied that I couldn't even lift my own arm up. I had to pick up my arm with my other arm and place it down places. It was kind of gross. And of course this makes sense, I didn't use that arm at all for months, so of course it wasted away and became weak. And the thing is, we're doing that same thing to our intrinsic foot muscles all the time without even realizing it. Regular shoes have an elevated heel, putting you constantly in a state of plantar flexion. This basically means that your foot is pointing down, which means your calf is in a shortened position at all times. That's a problem, but what we talk about less is that the thick sole, the thick hard sole, not only cuts off your sense from the ground, but prevents you from using your feet to grip the floor. It prevents you from using those intrinsic muscles of the foot. And this is why if you try and balance on something in shoes with a thick sole, you're going to find it much harder than balancing on that same thing barefoot. Try it. Balance along a beam barefoot and then try and balance along the same beam with regular trainers on. You're going to find there's a world of difference and you're far more likely to fall off wearing regular trainers. But not only are you immediately cutting yourself off from those sensors by wearing the trainers, you're also preventing those muscles from developing the way that they should, meaning that you're never going to be able to balance or run or jump as fast and as high and as well as you can. Likewise, regular shoes often have a narrow toe box. That means your toes are scrunched together. This prevents them from splaying and providing a wider surface area to balance on, but it also of course means that you're weakening those interossei muscles, the ones that are responsible for abducting and adducting them together. So now we know the problem, the next question is, what can we do to address this issue? Well, one option is to use lots of little toe strengthening exercises, and there's all sorts of different things you can do. Ballerinas, for example, are known to practice pressing their big toe into the floor. You can wear toe spacers which splay the toes apart and help to counteract some of the negative effects of having that narrow toe box. You can do exercises like foot shortening. Here you literally place your foot on the ground or hold it in the air and you try and shorten it by bringing the ball of the foot towards the heel, not the toes. You're going to try and keep the toes nice and straight. You're focusing on contracting and flexing the foot itself. Then there are lots of other variations you can use with bands to provide resistance or just pushing into the ground. You can even try and move your feet on different surfaces, and all of this stuff is great and it would work really well, and some people have a lot of success with it. I highly recommend checking out Nassim Inyang's video on this. He goes into detail on it and provides so many different exercises you can do for your feet, so many different products you can buy that'll help you with that, all very cheap and accessible. It's all good stuff. But I know personally that I'm not going to do this stuff, and I think a lot of you guys aren't going to do this stuff either. Be honest with me and be honest with yourself. Do you honestly think you're going to wear toe spacers now for, weeks or months on end on a regular basis? Are you really going to be dedicating time in your evening to doing foot shortening exercises? Personally, this is the sort of thing that in the past I got really excited about, and I would have spent a lot of time doing it only to then give up. Keep in mind that these detrimental effects have come from years and years, decades probably, of wearing shoes, of not really training your feet. And this is for hours and hours and hours at a time every single day. So to counteract that huge amount of, incidental training, you're gonna have to do an awful lot of good stuff to make up for it. In other words, it's gonna take you years to see any real results. And personally, I spend enough time at the gym already doing a bunch of weird stuff, and when I relax in the evenings, I could be picking up balls with my feet whilst I watch TV, but I just want to chill for an hour because that's about all I have after I've put the kids to bed and tidied up. I want to play some Deus Ex Invisible War at the moment, which is, much better than a lot of people say, but the point is, I want to focus on that and relax. I don't want to be scrunching my feet, and I think a lot of you guys are going to be in the same boat. So what can we do instead? Well, to me, the answer is to train the feet muscles incidentally. Here's the thing. We obviously are supposed to have stronger intrinsic foot muscles. We see lots of issues that people have with their feet because they've been stuffed into small shoes. But out in the wild, indigenous tribes of humans, they don't spend all day doing foot shortening exercises and picking up tennis balls. I don't think we need to be trying to train every single tiny muscle group individually because this is just an insanely large task. It would take far too long. This is something I noticed when talking about things like training the anterior tibialis, which dorsiflexes the foot, raises the toes up to the sky. Training this is a useful way to improve your biomechanics, and it can help to prevent injuries and issues like shin splints, especially if you're an athlete. But again, just raising your foot for, hours on end isn't something that most people really have time for, especially when there's so many other things we need to be doing. So to me, what's much better is if you can get those benefits without really thinking about it. And that also makes more sense. If you think that the body kind of needs these to be stronger, you have to think, how would it naturally have gotten these stronger? And in that case, the answer I think is swimming, which requires, of course, dorsiflexion, as you have to kick your feet through the water, and hill sprints, trail running, anything where you need to raise your feet quickly and powerfully to get them over obstacles on the ground. So by doing those things, you're kind of taking care of the anterior tibialis and providing so many other benefits without worrying about it. And it's the same thing with the intrinsic muscles of the feet. And actually, it's very similar exercises. I think what we should be focusing on here is trail running. When you trail run, as you run, your feet are hitting uneven terrain at a speed. If you're running through the woods, if you're running through hills, there's going to be ditches, twigs, stones, and each time your foot hits one, it has to react to that change in shape underneath it. It's going to feel it, you're going to get the proprioceptive feedback, and it's going to contract and reshape itself so that you can then push off the ground with maximum force and stability, whatever kind of terrain you might be running on. Now the problem of course is that doing this with thick soles on your feet and thick heels is going to kind of negate a lot of these benefits, because essentially you're running with a big thick piece of foam between you and the ground. So barefoot trail running is the answer, and this will provide most of the training you need for your intrinsic foot muscles, and I speak for experience on this front. Personally, again, when it comes to the practicality, I'm not someone who's willing to walk around completely barefoot. It looks a bit odd, and until your feet adapt, you're going to get lots of little stones in your feet, lots of little shards of glass if you're doing it around town. Props to anyone who's willing to make that commitment, but personally I'm not. So instead I wear minimal shoes. Minimal shoes which are designed to be as close to the experience of running barefoot as possible, while mitigating some of the issues associated with that. So they have a much thinner sole, a much more flexible sole, they have a much wider toe box and a flat heel. All those things allow the foot to still feel the ground to a slightly lesser extent, but better than nothing, and to bend and shape itself around the ground. Speaking from experience, I've been wearing barefoot shoes now I've been wearing them on and off for 10 years, and I've been wearing them, constantly as my only real footwear for at least 5 years. So, I'm pretty much all in on this. And for me personally, I used to be someone who would occasionally twist my ankle. I actually had an avulsion fracture on my ankle where the tendon pulled at the bone and created a fracture. When I was much younger, put my foot into a rabbit hole. So I used to occasionally twist my ankle, especially running around and doing all the crazy stuff I do. I haven't twisted my ankle in years and years. In fact, the other day I was filming with some people, had a drone flying over my head, and I was sprinting down this, uneven track in the woods, and my foot hit a root, and I felt exactly where it would have twisted. It still hurt a little bit, but I felt the tendons in the foot adapt and brace even as it hit this uneven terrain at high speed. So over time, you do develop far greater ground sense and control and balance, so that you don't have those kinds of injuries anymore. When I go for a trail run or even just a normal run on tarmac wearing my barefoot shoes, the next day I feel DOMs in my feet, not just soreness from battering the ground, actual DOMs because the muscles have been working, so I can feel this having an effect. And the result for me has been amazing. Like, my balance has improved significantly, not only because I'm wearing the shoes which gives me more proprioception, but because all those muscles are working together to ensure that I don't fall over. So I personally now can't go back. Obviously you do need to ease into this very gently and very carefully, because if you just go sprinting on a gravel track tomorrow barefoot or in minimal footwear and you're not used to it, you are going to injure yourself. That's unavoidable because you haven't developed the strength there, not only in the feet but also all the surrounding muscles in the ankles and the calves and the knees and the hips. So you really need to spend some time gradually easing into this. Start with just walking around the neighbourhood in the shoes, go for the occasional jog on soft, flat grass, and then as you get more used to it, you can start to increase the challenge. Of course, regular viewers of this channel will know that the specific barefoot shoes I wear are Vivo Barefoot. They're also today's sponsor. I'm a huge fan of these shoes because not only do they have all the properties that I look for in a barefoot shoe, being extremely light and bendy and flexy, so that you barely feel like you're wearing them, but they're also really stylish and they look good. Like, I get a lot of people commenting on them saying, like, where did you get those shoes? They look really cool. That's something that doesn't normally happen with barefoot shoes, okay? Like, a lot of barefoot shoes are pretty ugly, to put it quite simply. At the same time, they're really well made. They last for ages, and you get so many different designs and styles. So you can get walking shoes, you can get running shoes, trail running shoes, shoes for the gym, all of them offering different benefits and a different look. I also really like the company's values and their focus on sustainability. One of the most recent shoes, the Primus Lite 3.5s, are focused on specifically increasing this reusability. This new version has a 100% polyester upper, and this is really good because polyester is highly recyclable, and this takes the shoe from being 43% recyclable all the way up to 81%. To give Vivo Barefoot a try, head to the link in the description down below and use code BIONEER20 to get 20% off. Thanks again to Vivo Barefoot for sponsoring this video, and now on with the show. If you're not interested in going trail running in minimal shoes, which again is quite a commitment for a lot of people if you're not into running, for example, then there are other things you can do. In particular, barefoot calisthenics is actually a really good option, or barefoot mobility training. I don't recommend taking your shoes off completely at your local gym, not only because you'll probably get thrown out, especially if yours are yellow and wet like mine, but also because you might drop something on your feet. Wearing minimal shoes is fine, and especially if you are using movements that you're confident with, but just bear that in mind when you're doing this. However, if you're doing calisthenics and you're at home, then you can train barefoot completely, and there's no issue here. Now when you do something like a pistol squat, you're not only balancing with your ankles and with your hips, you're also using those intrinsic foot muscles. You'll literally feel your feet contract and adjust to try and keep you balanced as you go up and down. this is a great movement to work on in general. At the same time, because you're not wearing a shoe and your heel is flat on the floor, it's going to give you more of a challenge because you're not getting that little boost in terms of mobility. This will train your actual mobility. The same thing goes to something like an anterior reach. Shout out to JC Santana for popularizing this one. Basically, this is like a one-legged good morning or a one-legged RDL. You're reaching forwards, standing on one leg, hinging at the hip in order to test your balance and control. And again, if you're doing this barefoot, you're going to really feel the foot working to help stabilize you. Another good one, and again this comes from Nasima, is to swing your legs. So if you're standing on one leg and do leg swings, swinging up and back and left and right, this is a great warm-up, it's great for mobility, it's dynamic stretch. But again, if you're standing on one foot and that foot is barefoot, you're going to be really working those muscles to keep yourself balanced like that. Basically any exercise you do like that, sissy squats, Hindu squats, regular bodyweight squats, if you're in bare feet, you're going to be working harder to train them. Jump rope can also be useful for something like training the flexor digitorum brevis. This is the one that strengthens the arch of the foot and helps you to flex the foot. As you're jumping up and down on the balls of your feet, naturally they're going to want to flatten or even extend under the pressure of hitting the ground, and you're going to then have to contract in order to shorten the foot and prevent that from happening. This provides an isometric contraction then, and over enough reps you should start to see some benefits. Finally, there's all the incidental stuff. Recommend not wearing slippers around your house but going barefoot, walking around, and then you can practice doing pistol squats or leaning forwards whilst you brush your teeth, standing on one leg whenever it suits you, and picking things up with your feet. This is where you can pick things up with your feet. I never really drop something like a towel and don't pick up with my feet because I just find it enjoyable, and at the same time I'm working balance, I'm working those intrinsic foot muscles, proprioception, all that good stuff. So, I'm all about trying to integrate training into our daily lives, moving and playing more, and getting those benefits as a byproduct of that, instead of sitting down and doing all these boring, weird little things to try and make up for the fact that you're not moving throughout the day. So there you go, guys. That's how you can train the intrinsic muscles of the feet. Is there anything I've missed? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this kind of training, then check out my ebook and training program, Super Functional Training 2.0. Link in the description down below. That's a training program that focuses on building not just strength and muscle on the typical big lifts, but looking at performance across the whole body. That means things like moving in the rotational plane. It means strength endurance. It even means focus and awareness, training all aspects of your body together in a more cohesive and holistic manner. It comes with over 2 hours of instructional video and an 80+ page ebook, so if that sounds interesting, then check it out. Otherwise, either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.